Rodgers gets the snap. Blitz is on. Rodgers scrambles left, winds up Rainbow.
Cobb.
He's got Cobb at the 10 to the 5
Yes!
to the end zone. Touchdown and a dagger. Oh my goodness. An NFC North Division Championship dagger.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Real Packers Talk, the podcast dedicated to everything green and gold. I am your host, Ethan Peltier. You can find me anywhere on Instagram or Twitter at Real Packers Talk. And I'm back at it again today to give you a quick preview of the upcoming preseason matchup between the Green Bay Packers and the New England Patriots. We'll go over their joint practices that they held this week, as well as key matchups and players to look for moving into Saturday's matchup. As I just mentioned, the Patriots are in town. They actually showed up in Green Bay way earlier in the week. I believe it was either Monday or Tuesday that they arrived. And they held two joint practices with the Packers on both Tuesday and Wednesday. And basically, everything that I've heard, I want to remind y'all that I'm getting a lot of my information from the internet, from other content creators who are actually in Green Bay. So everything that I say, take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. I wasn't there to see all of what happened, but it sounds like the Packers dominated the first day of joint practices. It looked like they were sharp. They were kind of carving up the New England defense, and for the most part, it looked like they were the much more poised team. Wednesday was a different story, however. The Patriots ended up dominating that second practice. In fact, I heard a couple of reporters say that the Packers just looked flat, and this is something that in the Matt LaFleur era the Packers have dealt with, where they kind of get punched in the mouth and they're slow to respond or they don't respond at all. And it sounds more or less that was kind of what happened on Wednesday's practice. There were a couple of fights that broke out, which, don't get me wrong, I love the intensity, and this is something that is almost bound to happen, especially when you're dealing with such things as joint practice. You don't want to see guys getting in stupid fights for no reason. And, apparently it sounded like there were even upwards of 6 or 7 fights, comparatively speaking. Last week, when the Packers had joint practices with the Cincinnati Bengals, I believe only 1 or 2, maybe 3 fights broke out, but nothing like what we saw on Wednesday with the Patriots in town. And like I said, again, I'm all for the intensity. I want to see our players be smart and not not that they would get suspended from practice, but you just don't want to see people get hurt for no reason. So I just wanted to address that and get that out of the way. Once again, I will reiterate the point that it's just practice. These are just preseason games. Everything that I'm talking about for the next couple of weeks, you don't want to overreact to it. You don't want to assume that they're going to be either great or terrible. We just want to take it as we get it, and, everything that players do nowadays is put under a microscope, and we like to overanalyze now that we've got things like film, and there's so many talking heads. I mean, I'm one of them. I put my voice out on the internet multiple times a week to share my thoughts and opinions, but I do believe that we get into this territory of overanalyzing and, like I said, overreacting. I just want to reiterate that we don't want to do that. Not on this podcast, at least. We want to kind of be reasonable about our expectations. I try to be as reasonable as I can possibly be. So again, just wanted to reiterate, we don't want to overreact to practice. But the flashes have been there. And what I mean by flashes, I mean we've seen Jordan Love make a couple of wow throws. We've seen Luke Musgrave tear up other teams' defenses, as well as young receivers on our team. They've been able to make plays. I heard about a play that Jaden Reed made on the sideline or in the back of the end zone. He made a fantastic catch, and I don't have video to go with it, but he didn't get his feet in bounds, apparently. They rolled it out of bounds, but the catch was the impressive part about that, and it's just a matter of, putting it all together. So that's just one example of these flashes that I'm talking about. Of course, on the defensive side on the ball, we've seen guys like Carrington Valentine just come in and absolutely tear it up and be all over the place, make plays. He's had multiple pick sixes in practices. And then our defensive line has also shown tremendous growth as well as depth. And those are all very good, positive things to not hang your hat up on, but to say, hey, we're working with something. We can cook with fire here, right? So I do want to stress that there are going to be ups and downs. I'll probably say something along the lines of that multiple times throughout this season. We should expect to see highs and lows. The good news is that we know that these guys are playmakers, these young receivers, these young defensive playmakers. We know that we've got a solid roster to build off of, and it's just a matter of getting them on the field and getting those real-time game reps to see what they actually have. Moving forward, we do have another preseason game coming up this Saturday. The Patriots will be playing the Packers at Lambeau Field at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And going into this matchup, I know last week I kind of speculated, like, hey, maybe the starters will play a little bit more. Well, we'll see. Based on everything that I've heard, though, up until this point, it does sound like we should expect to see more or less the same as far as, like, playing time from our starters. And obviously vice versa for the Patriots as well. I do not anticipate that they're going to throw their starters out there for a whole lot. And does that mean that Jordan Love is going to get more than 2 drives? Who knows? Maybe he gets half a quarter or a whole quarter. The point is that we shouldn't expect to see a whole lot of Love. I think they feel more confident and more comfortable after seeing what he did last week against the Bengals. Obviously, he had that one missed throw on the crosser route to Luke Musgrave, and that's really the thing that I'm going to be looking for, and I'll jump into a little bit more about what I'm talking about in a little bit. But, like I said, we should just expect to see a couple of drives from the starters, from each team. Not a whole lot. And, maybe that changes with the last preseason game. Maybe it doesn't. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see until then. I am interested to see what the intensity looks like, though, in this game. I mentioned that there were multiple fights that broke out on Wednesday. And, again, I did mention the fact that there were fights that broke out in the Cincinnati practice, right? My point is that because there were that many more fights in the practices on Tuesday and Wednesday, or I guess rather just Wednesday, what is the intensity going to look like? Is that going to carry over into the game? We will see. I don't anticipate that it will. Again, it is just preseason. I don't think anyone's going to go out there trying to take someone's head off any more than they would for a normal preseason matchup. But something to look for. As far as my players to watch, I mentioned Jordan Love. I feel like that's going to be like an obvious, like, hey, everyone's going to be watching Jordan Love every single time he's on the field just because he is so young and because, truthfully, we don't know exactly what we've got with him. I mentioned the miss to Musgrave on the crossing route. Everything that Jordan Love is going to be doing is going to be put under a microscope, and that's fine. I would like to see, if he only does play 2 drives, let's say he only plays 2 drives, I would like to see him not have any of those throws, not have any of those blatant misses. And yes, inaccuracy issues are going to be a problem with any quarterback at any level, and he might miss a throw here and there, but ideally you'd like to see him have a couple of drives where he just doesn't miss a single thing, right? That would be ideal. I think that would make a lot of people feel a lot more confident and comfortable, even though it is just preseason. Moving forward, though, I will be keeping an eye on Malik Heath again. He has had a fantastic training camp, had a wonderful preseason game. He's been an absolute dog, and I hope he continues to build off of that, as well as the other receivers. There were a couple other young receivers like, Samori Toure or Dontavian Wicks. You want to see if these guys can build off of the success that they had in practice as well as the previous preseason game. On top of that, Emmanuel Wilson caught a lot of eyes last week against the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's pushing hard for a roster spot. Again, I mentioned that if he's able to demonstrate that he is a capable blocker and can play on special teams, he'll probably have that much better of a chance of making the roster. But it would be interesting to see if he's able to make a couple more splash plays as a running back once the third and fourth stringers kind of get into the game, like later into the preseason game. Switching over to the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to continue to keep an eye on Carrington Valentine. He has been phenomenal, and he even had an interception last week. So we'll see if he can build off of that success as well. The defensive front, as I mentioned in this episode, has shown both growth and depth, and they have been giving the New England offensive line, or it sounds like they were giving the New England offensive line fits during at least on Tuesday, maybe not so much on Wednesday as much, but something to look forward to. Lastly, I know we're all really concerned about our kicking situation right now with Anders Carlson. He's had, for no other way to put it, he's had an up and down camp. He's had up and down preseason games, up and down practices, no matter how you look at it. The kicking talent is obviously there. He's got a strong leg, but he's not the most accurate, and he just has certain moments where you're like, what are you thinking? This has to get cleaned up, and I know that I mentioned in my last episode that, hey, let's give him some time, let's be patient with this. Yes, my position on that has not changed. Let us be patient, let us see what we've got. But considering how it's been so up and down, you might want to consider bringing in more competition. Now, that might not be a decision that they make until after this game. Let's say Carlson goes out and has a really bad performance and he misses every kick. I think you have to bring in competition at that point. Even if it's another rookie that you signed from someone else's roster, you have to bring in someone just in case. Because one thing that the Packers can't afford to do is lose games because they don't have a kicker who can hit PATs or chip shot field goals. Additionally, you possibly might want to keep your eye out on the punting competition. Not that I think that Pat O'Donnell's job is in any jeopardy, but the name of the second string punter is escaping my mind right now, and I do apologize for that. I'll have to go ahead and look that up. But I do want to keep an eye on that. If I know the Packers have been leaning towards wanting to stay younger, so if they decide, hey, we've got a decent leg in this second kid, they might end up cutting Pat O'Donnell. That might very well be a possibility. I don't think that's the case right now, but again, something to keep your eye on. Wrapping up this episode, I do want to just say, it is preseason. Once again, let's not overreact. Let's just take it for what it is. I hope they can continue to stay healthy, although there were a decent amount of injuries last week, including a torn ACL from Tyler Davis, which, my heart goes out to him. I pray for a speedy and quick recovery for him, and hopefully he's able to get back on his feet sooner than later. But for the rest of the roster, we cannot afford to have any more of these season-ending injuries, not in preseason. And you don't want to see that happen anytime, but especially not in preseason. So let's stay sharp, let's stay focused, let's not do dumb things, and above all else, let's try and stay as healthy as we possibly can. And then to top it all off, I personally think that this is a fantastic opportunity. I'm actually really happy that the Packers decided to do joint practices with both the Bengals and the Patriots. This will be the last time that they do the joint practices this year, for obvious reasons. There's both both positives and negatives that come with joint practices, I think, in most people's opinions. In my opinion, I think the positive far outweigh the negatives of possible injuries or possible fights. The opportunity to play against another team, another well-coached team at that in the New England Patriots, it's just tremendous experience. It's a tremendous opportunity for young players to kind of get their feet wet a little bit and see what they're really up against. But that's about everything that I had for this episode. I just wanted to briefly go over the joint practices as well as give a little bit of a preview for this upcoming preseason matchup. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening to Real Packers Talk. You can find the podcast anywhere on YouTube, Spotify, or Anchor. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or Twitter. I love interacting with other football fans. Specifically, I love talking with other Packers fans. It's awesome. I'm so happy that I am able to do this. But with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And as always, go Pack Go.